All right, I want to show you how to create a report using SQL Server Report Builder. Before you start, you might want to have SQL Server Management Studio running because we're going to need to get some information from that. So if you want to start that up first, you can. It's not necessary. So I'm going to start Report Builder. I'll show you where it is on my computer. If I go to Start and go down to SQL Server, when I installed Report Builder, it made a second SQL Server 2016 folder here. That's where the Report Builder is. So it's not going to be under the normal folder. I'm going to expand this other one, and that's where I'll launch Report Builder from. So I'm going to show you how to make a basic report and also show you how to design a couple things on the report as well. So when Report Builder starts, we're going to do a new report, and we're going to click over here. We're going to click Table or Matrix Wizard. So I'm going to click that, and then it's a matter of following a few specific steps. So notice create a data set. That's what we want to do. So we're just going to make sure that's selected and hit Next down here. And we're going to have to hit this New button. And that's where this information is going to come in from the Management Studio, which I'll show you in just a moment. So we can pretty much go with the defaults here. You can give your data source a different name if you want, but we're just going to keep things simple right now. Microsoft SQL Server is what we want selected from this drop-down. But the connection string is the important part. I'm just going to put the connection string in here, and then I'll talk a little bit about it. So this is going to be my connection string. I specify a data source and also an initial catalog. Give me a moment and I'll talk about what those two things are and how you'll get that information. So I'm going to go back here just so it's easier to read. So your connection string is basically going to consist of a data source. So notice it's data space source equals, and then you have to specify basically the name of your SQL Server instance. So that's why I said having Management Studio open, if you look up here, that's where I got that information from. So on every machine, that's going to be different. On mine, I guess when I installed SQL Server, it named it this laptop dash whatever, and then it's typically going to be / SQL Express. So notice in my data source, that's what I put as my data source, laptop dash / SQL Express. That's the first part of my connection string. But we don't want to have to tell it which database to go looking for later, so we might as well just specify that here, and that's what that initial catalog is. So that's important as well. So notice it's a semicolon between the data source and the initial catalog. So we got initial space catalog equals, and then this will be the name of your database itself. Here's what I mean. So notice in SQL Management Studio, I have some databases. So if I wanted to use this database, that's what I'd specify as my initial catalog. I'm going to use this test one. So notice I have a database here called Test Medical. So my initial catalog is going to be that database. That way, when I run some queries against some tables, it'll be looking in that database for those tables. So I've specified those two things in the connection string. Basically, you just have to type those in manually and check your spelling and everything. But we want to do one other thing from this screen. We want to go to the credentials. So there's a couple things we can choose here. What I would recommend is just use the current Windows user. So we needed to go to this credentials and check this little radio button here. And then we can hit OK. After you do that, you probably want to hit this test connection. So if you had misspelled the database name, or if your credentials didn't work, you might get a failure message there, in which case you could probably click this, hit edit, and go back and check the information you put in for that data source. So I'm going to hit next. Once I've tested the connection, I'm going to hit next. There's still a few more steps you need to do to create a report. So there's different ways to get data. We've specified a database, but now we need to really tell it what table we want to get data from. So one way to do that is to go up here and hit edit as text and put in a query. So I'm just going to put in a really generic query here. I think I have a table, and again, this is where having this open might help. I can go double check my table names. So I'm going to get everything out of this visit info table just for the purposes of this. So when you do edit as text, you type in your query, and then you can test it by hitting this little exclamation point. So it looks like the query is working. It's getting data that we can use in our report that we're going to build. So I'm going to hit next down here. And this is where using the report builder sort of starts to come in. So what we have over here is all the fields that I got by selecting star from that table. And we need to drag some of those over here to add them to our report. And typically you're going to drag them into this values area. But I want to show you one thing to look out for when you do that. So let's just add 2 or 3 fields here. I'm going to add the patient number, visit date, maybe reason for visit, and diagnosis. And obviously, depending on what kind of report you're trying to build, you could add additional fields as well. But the thing to look out for, we've put them all in this values area. For numeric fields, it looks like it's trying to do a sum for some reason. We don't want it to do that. We just want to see the patient number, visit, etc. So when you add things over here, double check and make sure it's not trying to do a sum or an average or something like that. So the way to keep it from doing that, I'm just going to click the drop down by that, uncheck that sum. That way we're not having any weird calculations happening to any of our data here. Then we'll just hit next. And I think that's pretty much it. We don't want to change any of these. Hit next again, hit finish to get to our report. So that's how you build a report, but now we sort of need to look at it, preview it, and possibly change it a little bit. So this is our design of our report that it's showing. So the first thing you might want to do when you get to this screen is hit this run button up here to actually see your report and see the data. First time you run it might take a second because it's going out to SQL Server and getting all that data. So that's really it as far as creating a report. From this point, we could hit this little disk button and save it. And from that point, it's pretty much like a typical file. You can give it a name. That RDL is going to be a report that opens with this report builder program that we're using. So you can put it, on your desktop or in your documents, wherever you want to put it. So that's really how you use the report builder to create a report, but I also want to show you just how to redesign this report a little bit. So I'm going to hit this design tab up here and go back to this view. So from this design view, it's a little bit strange how it works. So one thing you might notice about the report, some of the data is kind of clumped together, maybe even cut off a little bit. So if we want to make these fields wider, we can go to Design. And if we just click in here somewhere, the best way I can describe this is kind of like Microsoft Excel. So to make one of these wider, we can't grab like this edge, we have to grab up here. All right, so notice I can stretch this out by doing that, or stretch this one out. And this one may also need stretching out because even though there's nothing over here, the data might get cut off here. So this is just kind of some basics of how to redesign your report. And you can test it by running it and seeing the difference in how your data looks. Notice this is still kind of scrunched together, so we could certainly work on that more. But I want to show you a couple of other things about this design, and that is you can also treat each one of these boxes or cells kind of individually. So notice if you wanted to align this visit date title up here to the left, I could just click in there and then kind of use kind of like your Microsoft Word editing. You could just align left. You can even select some of this and make it a larger font. Or if you wanted, and this is another kind of similar to Microsoft Excel, we could click over here, select all those titles, and then change the font to, say, a bigger font. Notice when we do that, we can't quite read it all. Again, kind of like Microsoft Excel, we could grab it over here to resize those as well. So that's kind of how to edit your report once you've built it. One other thing to keep in mind here is you could change these. So if you wanted to make this capital V, you could go up there and edit those that way as well. All right. So now you should know how to create a report, save it, redesign it a little bit, including resizing, changing names. Check one other thing that you can add a title and so forth. I may make a separate video for that. So when you've made your changes, just hit save again, and that's really all there is to it.